good morning, everybody. First of all, I want to say thanks to everybody that wished my grandma happy birthday. I was wrong. She turned 94 this past weekend. There she is. She loves hummingbirds. She has like 4, 5, 6 feeders in her yard over in West Central Illinois, and she has she goes about 50 pounds of sugar a summer making them. The nectar that they drink. That's my mom over there on the left, and again, my grandma. She's an amazing lady, and she's in great health, and so I'm so just blessed to have such a long part of my life with her. Although it's kind of funny, I was just looking at this picture while I was talking, and my grandfather was in the Navy, and so all of the boys in the family have pictures in the same like Navy outfit, and that is my son, Graham, when he was a little kid. And if you were curious if I share a lot of DNA with this kid, yes, we are almost the exact same person. You can't see my picture right there, but I do have this great Kmart silhouette picture from when I was really little. So anyway, we're here to talk about whether or not that. All right, it's been a really cold finish to August and start now of September. I want to give you some stats. Now, I say cold, and I'm only talking about where I live in surrounding states, because throughout the West, it's been the opposite. The blocked pattern across the North Pacific has been pretty extreme, and it's driven a lot of heat here. So the finish to August, from the 21st through the 31st, everywhere that you see the number 1 here set a new record for high temperatures. And then you can find over here that right up in this part of the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina, the Blue Ridge Mountains here, that is now the new coldest finish to August on record in that area. So just a tremendous amount of cold air just diving in. Now, we're concerned later on this week about the fact that the Pacific is still blocked. So there's the trough that's in the Bering Sea. You can see the high over the low setup here. There's actually 2 lows, and this is helping just drive deeper troughs of low pressure that are just really plummeting pretty far into the south, giving us this highly amplified pattern. There's been a lot of concern about what that's going to do in terms of a frost threat. So I'm just going to take you to it, since it's coming through the Midwest, upper Midwest, Great Lakes. This is what the temperatures look like on Wednesday evening. And as we play this forward, you can see the front very well defined right here, diving through my home state of Illinois, out of Michigan over to parts of Missouri. But as we get into, this is 1 a.m. Thursday. This is Thursday morning by 7 a.m. And we just start to see a lot of very low 40s in the European model. Now, several models have been predicting this. The GFS, for example, was putting down very cold temperatures here, plus a bunch of snow into parts of Ontario, which we're going to take a closer look at in just a few moments here. But this is pretty chilly air that's coming through. But the models have backed off on this as of late. Thursday morning, you do see here we've got quite a bit in the in the 40s, while still very, very warm out west, still warm in the northeast. But I just want to make a word of caution. I would not be surprised, and we kind of draw this in. There are areas that just at times get down and touch freezing in this area. And maybe I included a little bit too much of the Red River Valley this year, but parts of northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, getting into the UP certainly can do it. Now, the lakes are generally what keeps lower Michigan warm going forward. Same thing for this part right in through here of Ontario. But since I mentioned Ontario, I might as well go back and have a look at this. Let's go back home. I want to choose the GFS model. We're about to release a new design of our website. I'm pretty pumped about that. And total snow. I just wanted to show you this. As this low comes curling up, look at that. This is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. See the snow forecast right in through here. It's still there as this deeper low just wraps itself out in this area, driving in that colder air. So we need to be well aware of the risk of getting some snowfall in this particular part of Canada as we go forward. Now, back to those temperatures. The frost risk map. Now, remember, when I make this, I say anything that's forecast to be below 35, go ahead and put a shading of gray on the map. And right now, you just see a few little flecks of it here and then in the high elevation in Colorado. So I just want to make another point that we will likely have some low-lying frost issues. But overall, the threat of a widespread frost is pretty minimal. But this is what was interesting about last week. A couple of the groups I spoke to in central Illinois were talking about 1974. And Labor Day of 1974 actually saw a similar pattern as to what we just saw at the end of August. Very, very cold across the eastern 2/3 of the country, 3/4 of the country, while the west was extremely hot. And what was going on was something very similar. If you can have a look at this real quick. There was a trough in the Bering Sea. There was a much more amplified high over low pattern that was between the Arctic and the Chukchi Sea getting up to the Gulf of Alaska. And this kind of drove what I would call it's almost like a double barrel deep low that was able to source a bit more Arctic air more routinely into the central and eastern part of the United States. So there are some similarities to that. But overall, the biggest difference is this. This year, in the North Pacific, all of this water is very, very warm. I mean, Japan just smashed an all-time record for the month of August in temperatures. But the map I just drew on is 1974, the beginning of 1974. Was there a La Nina building? Well, there was one decaying. There was a little bit of warm water that showed up here, but look how cold the North Atlantic and the North Pacific were. This just helps with the overall position of the jet. The cooler these two bodies of water are, the farther to the south the jet is across North America. That's it in a nutshell. But there was, La Nina-esque behavior in the atmosphere. Just take a look at it. 1973 to 74, so that's the preceding winter. The one we were going into at that time was right here. And interestingly enough, we're at about the same strength today in terms of a weak La Nina. Now, the atmosphere does have momentum to it in terms of its most recent behavior. And where we currently are, as we kind of think about, this overall, La Nina-like pattern going into January of 2025, is that the previous winter, getting way back here to 23-24, was an El Nino. We didn't have that. That was back in 72-73. So just a little bit of different. We were in the middle of a double dip La Nina, as you can see, right? Actually, a triple, 1, 2, 3. In that particular case. So there are some similarities, but you can't ignore the glaring differences here. Such warm ocean temperatures in the North Pacific and North Atlantic overall comparatively. So, La Nina there, but a lot different from that 1974 setup, which drove in that frost. Now, when you look at that week, the month of September, I want to point something out to you. We are cool right now in the eastern half of the country, and the west is warm, just like it was in September of 1974. These are the stats from all of September 1974. But take a look at what happened in October. In October, cooler air stayed in the Northeast, but then we went over to like a top 20 warmest Octobers in the northern plains, and the West Coast backed off. So I want you to understand that if we start to build into a cooler time period in late summer, it does not mean fall is going to be cold, right? It often oscillates and flip-flops back and forth, and that's certainly what happened here. And just for the fun of it, why not look from November 1st through December? It was still quite mild of a early start to the fall and early start to winter across that section of the country, while the west went cool. So you can completely flip these things around. The atmosphere does it all the time, which is what makes subseasonal weather predictions so difficult. So that was 1974, just because I got asked about it multiple times last week. Now, just for the fun of it, I went and pulled up the Almanac, the winter forecast from 2024 to 2025. And I thought it'd be good to do this because you'd be surprised at the number of people that show me the Farmer's Almanac and say, what do you think? And what I think is, I don't even know who makes this. Like, I'm not even sure the method. I've tried to read about it. I know that they tend to use solar cycles and El Nino, La Nina, and things like that. But I hate to say this, but sometimes I read it just for entertainment purposes only, right? They tend to use real fun words like wet winter whirlwind. And so this was the prediction for last year. And we better go ask, how did it do? All right, I'm going to start where I live. Cold, wet, and white, cold average snowfall. How about in the Midwest here? Do we have average snowfall? No. We were way behind on snowfall, so we kind of missed on that one. Average temperatures and precipitation for the Southwest. Well, it was not average. It was incredibly dry last winter, and it was hot. So, okay, we're missing on that one. Let's go back. How about the Southeast? Mild and wet. So was it wet? No. It was drier than average. And was it mild? No. Do you remember we had this epic snowfall event that hit here last year? And maybe one more. Let's go to the Northeast. Moderate temps, wet and white. Were they white? Only right off the Great Lakes. The rest of the interior of the Northeast did not have much snow. The precipitation was a bit mixed in the Northeast, and it was cooler than average in that area. So is that what they said? No, mild. Okay, so, hey, it just is what it is. But let's go look at it because this is the forecast for this year. And it's got a lot of milds, I notice, and It's trying to keep the mountains. Oh, this is very La Nina. Look, there's a wet region in through here and wet there. That is the classic La Nina jet dives in, exits. This is about as La Nina as you can get. But I'm just going to tell you, it is what it is. I just wouldn't rest on it and say, hey, this is what we're going to have this winter. It's just a point of reference. That's all. More importantly, I'm sorry, I got a joke about this. When I was a teenager, I actually met my wife when we were 5 years old. And we started dating, I don't know, junior, senior, high school. We were high school sweethearts. And I'm almost not here today because of these things. There was a time when we were like 18, 17. We were driving, and my wife was driving down a gravel road, and she swerved to miss a woolly worm. And boy, we almost lost it. Anyway, survived that event, and we're still surviving these today. But she asked me, and we were talking the other day, she goes, man, I've seen a whole lot of dark brown woolly worms. And she goes, just remind me again, does that mean anything? Now, she's a nurse, she doesn't care. And I said, no, the color of these worms means nothing. But, you see where I work down in central Champaign County, South Central Champaign County, we have a lot of them that are colored like this. And just a reminder, the woolly worms, their coat has nothing to do with the upcoming winter forecast. And we can go on and on about that, but just trust me on this one, okay? But the question is, like, are we screwed? Like, this is crazy. Look at how I haven't seen this color in a long time, but it had more to do with the hot, dry finish to summer than anything, giving them their color. So I want to remind you of how winter works. We often have memories of winter based upon limited events. So the winter of 24, 25, if you were in the South, you will remember the blizzard that swiped through New Orleans, got all the way to Florida's Panhandle, got into the southern Georgia. You will remember that winter for the rest of your life. And you'll remember, oh, it was so cold, it was so snowy, the snow was feet deep. But I'm going to remind you of something. You've been staring at dominant controls of winter patterns. Now, we focus so much on the West, out in the Pacific. I'm going to start on the East this time. Sorry, you've been looking at this for so long, but we have this thing called the North Atlantic Oscillation. And it basically tells me how wavy the jet stream is going to be. Its negative mode tends to just drive epic snowfall events up the East Coast, whereas its positive mode just tends to, keep a lot of warm air here. It tucks the colder air farther to the north. That's one of the big drivers of the eastern two-thirds of the country for winter. Now, we'll come back and look at the western ones later. But I also want to point out the other big thing is the polar vortex. Now, you've probably heard just recently that the cold air that's coming into the upper Midwest, Northeast is it's polar vortex. It's not. That's what the polar vortex looks like today. And if you're curious what you're looking at, one doesn't exist. It's not even set up yet. This is what it normally looks like. I mean, that's what it was back on Groundhog's Day of 2024 or 2025 earlier this year. It's this tight ring of stratospheric winds. And here's all you need to know. The tighter and more of a donut it looks like, the tighter its grip is on where the most Arctic air is, the coldest air. And it just kind of keeps it in a ring in that area. So what we look out for are disruptions in the polar vortex. And we had one of these back on March the 9th. And not always, but big polar vortex disruptions where it splits or wobbles or weakens dramatically can drive massive amounts of Arctic air somewhere in the northern hemisphere. It doesn't always mean the eastern half of the country. And this is where the polar vortex completely split. Massive stratospheric warming event over Alaska. See that? This is a ridge. And the polar vortex was over Scandinavia. But you see, we can't start talking about the polar vortex until we get into December. You see, what we're watching here are the winds at 60 degrees north and how strong they are as they go orbiting around the North Pole. And so we're here. Okay, this is nothing. So what we're watching out for is if the polar vortex stays up there compared to the average, which is this black line, then we tend to have limited interactions with really, really brutally cold air. It's when it's disrupted, like it was back in early March, I showed you that we can often have big cold air outbreaks. So this is not related to the polar vortex. This is where we are for the next 5 days. And as we slide this forward, there's that cold air coming through, and that's all the way out through day 5 through 10. Now take note of what's happening in the west. As we get to September 11th and beyond, there's a bit of a shift. And what I'm seeing here is more mild air moving east. Model's been consistent with that all weekend. And much cooler air establishing itself here across the west. And we need to see something shift in the west, maybe even chances of precip. because this is as the sun is rising this morning. Sorry, I got a little bit of a late start this morning. But just take a look yesterday. As we watch this stalled out feature here, the storms in south central Texas all the way down to southern Florida, I was watching a lot of the wildfire smoke yesterday. Large fires in Oregon, Washington, and big ones down here in parts of California as well. And if you look at it statistically, there's been 46,503 wildfires reported this year. That's 4.124 million acres. You can come down here and click on wildfire in acres and see how that compares to a year ago. Now, 2024 was double that for the whole season, okay? So much, much different year a year ago with respect to wildfires. But just wanted to point those stats out because we're going to watch that wildfire smoke just kind of, get throughout much of the west, northwest, and into western Canada. And it's interesting, over the next 48 hours, you can actually see the pattern of the atmosphere, bringing some of that colder air down and pushing the smoke with it. See it? Right in through there. So thinking about all of this, I do want to show you how dry the month of August was. We talked at length last week about flash drought development, and this particular area over the weekend picked up a lot of precipitation. I'll show you that in just a few moments here. But we watched, even though the southwest monsoon got going, it's still dry in the Four Corners states. And there's a pocket right in through here that has just been extremely dry this late summer time frame. Some places not measuring any precipitation during the month. And here's the issue. Over the next 14 days, okay, we still have this feature right in through here, bringing in rain now. There's some rain coming. I'll show you this with a frontal boundary that's going to sneak through Tennessee, Kentucky. We need that. But there's a lot of folks in that same very dry corridor that are not expecting to get much at all in terms of precip, while we start to see things changing for this part of the West Coast. More on that in just a few seconds. But I wanted to take you back over the weekend and show you just how much rain fell in the central U.S. We were planning on a lot of isolated storms. You saw the models last week curl a system up here into parts of, into parts of Nebraska, hit parts of Kansas, and there's where the sagging front was over most of the weekend. So this rainfall map makes a lot of sense given last week's forecasts. Just again, taking a look back at the last couple of days. But if you take a look right now, and this is the new website we're about to release. I'm beyond pumped. Matt and I have been working hard on this. But I want to show you where we got some rain this morning. This is just a quick look at the radar animation here early this morning on Labor Day. And it is still raining out of parts of Nebraska into Iowa, Missouri. Very slow moving precipitation in this area. Now, when we come back, though, to the bigger issue, what is preventing this region from going over wet? A lot of that I have to attribute to the fact that today the Bermuda high is here. And this is allowing more flow in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere to dive in here, which is preventing any sort of surface moisture return from the Gulf. And as I play this forward, you're just not going to see a lot of that. In fact, here's the deep low that comes through Ontario. That's the snowmaker I showed you earlier. There's the front that dives to the south of it. And it's not working with a lot of moisture. There'll be some rainfall, but not much. I'll show you that in a second. But as farther out I go, look at that low just curl itself up Thursday into Friday. And the Bermuda high, still a little bit too far east, isn't pumping moisture through the Gulf. And the later we go in the time frame, I still see the Bermuda high pretty far over to the central Atlantic. This is now the 9th, 10th, and 11th. And as we get out there toward the 12th and 13th, there is another low that the models are predicting that's trying to open up some flow. But I need you to see this. This is, if you follow the wind barbs, how things are going. All summer long, it went like that, pulling in deep tropical moisture. So this one might be a bit moisture starved as well as we start to look out there toward the middle of the month. Is there anything going on in the tropics worth note? In the East Pacific, yes, okay, but not in the Atlantic. There's a wave that's leaving Africa that the models have given about a 40% chance of developing. You can see it right here in the pocket of, the ensemble members low pressure. But I'm just going to be honest with you. If the Bermuda high, which is seen in these colors here, all right, if it stays, over in this area, there's a better chance that whatever this is stays out to open ocean. And again, we're not yet settled on anything hard and fast developing at this point. So to put a point to that, maybe we need to watch the Pacific. And over the next 10 days in the Pacific, the forecast models are giving a pretty good chance at something developing here, a low that is near the Philippines. And it's expected to go up and start to make a turn. Now, this is the time of year that any tropical system that develops here tends to get absorbed in the jet stream pattern, deepening troughs. And these tend to move across the North Pacific and 10 to 12 days later really disrupt weather patterns across North America. Now, we're early in seeing this, just to let you know. So this is over the next 3 to 4 days, something developing. So if this is going to affect North American weather, it's 2 weeks from now. Okay, you understand? So it's not in the near term, but we're going to watch it pretty carefully. So here's the bigger picture. All right, this is just a global view of the height pattern. So troughs in blue and ridges in red. Our blocked up pattern is still there through the beginning of this week. See it? High over a couple of lows. This is what drives these deep, deep troughs into the east. Again, had the North Atlantic and North Pacific been colder, that would shift the overall position of this trough further to the south, and that is what could have brought in a frost. But it's just not there yet. It's too mild this year in the North Pacific and North Atlantic. But here we are. That's the frost coming through. Excuse me. That's the front. Wrong F word there. Coming through this Wednesday, Thursday. And it's deep, but it's not truly anchored to the coldest air that it could get. Now watch this next weekend. That's Sunday. I'm keeping an eye on that guy right there. Because next Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, there is a western U.S. trough developing. In other words, the ridge trough pattern that was blocked up here seems to be gone. And now we open the midsection up to warmth and cooler, unsettled weather next week along the west coast. And I wanted to see what it looked like in terms of total precip. So let's put it all together with the European model this morning. All right, we expect today more rain in this area and some light rain coming in by midweek here. There's the front that's going to be sneaking through the upper Midwest while the stalled out stationary boundary stays pretty far to the south. We see that front. Look at this. This is now Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It is trying its absolute best Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to sweep through the Midwest, Mid-South, and into the Northeast. But if I take you all the way out to Saturday, I got to be honest, this is pretty lousy. I am going to wash my car today. I'm going to do that is my form of a rain dance to see if we can get some of this moisture in here. But what I'm hoping on is the moisture that could get into parts of Tennessee and Kentucky too. We need to see this rainfall happen. All right, that's out through Saturday. What about next week? No major tropical development, but look at the west. You see that? The 9th and 10th? I'm looking over here. There is something increasing the precipitation chances there. And then we start to see at the very end of the forecast, there's something sneaking through going up into Canada. This is on the Friday the 12th, Saturday the 13th. If I take you out there into 2 weeks, you end up getting this picture. So we've got places in through here that remain bone dry. And that's just, I'm only picking on this spot because I live here and I'm dealing with it right now. And we've been in flash drought scenario. Probability-wise, this is the chance over the next 10 days of staying under a ½ inch. And now we can see our drier spots. But we know that beyond this, okay, so dry here, very dry down here, and extremely dry in this region in the west. But we know, watch, that beyond the 11th, see that being erased in the west? That is when that trough fully makes its way on shore and starts to increase the precipitation chances, which is what we're going to keep a close eye on. But again, it's out there pretty far in the forecast for that next trough to come through. But all the major models, including the CPC, are bringing moisture into the west. And that is when that trough breaks down, gets out of the blocked pattern, and moves. And that's what we're seeing out there that far. Okay, I'm going to finish this up with just a bit on some longer range weather. We're going to keep looking at these, even though I'm not overly enthusiastic about their forecast. This is the newest GFS extended outlook for the month of September on precipitation. Now, you know that the temperatures are going to flip-flop, so we're not going to go out there and look at those with one model map. But there is risk of being drier than average across a broad section of North America. And they are showing that trough coming into the northwest. See it? That's the GFS. This is the European. Now, the European is capturing right now what's happening here. Okay, but overall, relatively similar features that we see. Biggest wild card is going to be this for September. All of this, sorry. Because as we get into September, the peak of the hurricane season is just, 12, 15 days away. And I've told you for weeks, I'm watching these two areas for some sort of development as the lid comes off the tropics, which we're going to talk about a lot this week, and see features in the jet stream move away such that you can get tropical systems to sneak in underneath. So just be aware that, yes, if there's no tropical system coming through, I don't have a reason to make it really, really overly wet in Louisiana. But you need to understand that we cannot make a call on that right now. Okay, bigger picture. Look at how much cooler the ocean temperatures are around Japan. Still hot, but cooler than they were by several degrees. As I mentioned, Japan set an all-time record. We still have our La Nina event, and it's showing up. It's going to be a factor for this winter. What I'm trying to figure out is how much of a factor, though, is the warmth in the North Pacific versus the La Nina developing here to determine the weather patterns across North America. That is why I'm giving a whole lot more attention to what I think will be an Atlantic-focused winter setup. In other words, watch the Arctic Oscillation, watch the North Atlantic Oscillation. I think they could be much more important for the winter forecast than anything else. I wish I could tell you better news about the MJO in terms of a forecasting metric. It is now diving right here, but it's mostly in null space, which means all of the forecasts we put together last week were like, oh, look, MJO phase 1, phase 2 could be such a critical factor for the rest of September. I don't think it is anymore. And that is why I think the National Weather Service, kind of gave us this outlook. Now, they've gone above average because we know the start of this new month is wet here. And they're above average down south as well, where there's a stalled out boundary. But the equal chances, I imagine if they amended this, in fact, what did they do on Friday? Yeah, this is what I expected. More of an equal chances in mid-September. I expected more mild. We do see the pattern opening up, so we could cool off in the west and bring in some warmer temperatures, I think, across this whole area. Just warmer temperatures. So I really like what the CPC has come up with here. What is a bit tough to swallow, though, is their drought outlook. They are expecting better conditions in the northwest and also down here, but they're expecting drought to get worse in pockets where we've had some major drought issues as of late. And that's just, we just get concerned as we see that, especially because this is feeding into 3 of the biggest rivers in the world, the Ohio, the Mississippi, and part of the Missouri. And right now, the Mississippi is just 2/3 of a foot above low stage. And this is going to have to be continued to be watched because a year ago, at this point, we were way down here. And we're worried that if we get down to where it was, last year, 10, 12 feet below low stage, we could be dealing with some major traffic issues on that vital river for agriculture in the central part of the United States. I got one last thing to tell you about, then I'll finally let you get back to your day here. South America, really not a whole lot of change in the forecast. The front is still stuck right in through parts of Paraguay, Rio Grande do Sul, parts of Uruguay. We do see drier conditions now showing up in the forecast for Argentina. But there is still no major indicator that the monsoon is getting going early. And the longer range forecast from the GFS, which is the one I'm leaning more toward right now, says not a big jump in monsoonal activity in the month of September. Now, the European is just still doing whatever the heck it wants to do. Let's go look at it here for South America. Precipitation anomalies. Look, it's got wetter conditions coming in this area, but I don't have evidence that it's just going to get wet in Mato Grosso. Like where you have to have high pressure here to force this, and there's a bit too much dry air. So I don't see the monsoon. Maybe in October, in November, but early monsoonal rains seem to be elusive right now for South America. Okay, that's all I got for you. I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Be safe, and we'll just talk tomorrow morning. Thanks.